So just some reminders about the coordinate plane. So when you're graphing on the coordinate plane, you want to be conscious of what quadrant you're graphing in. So quadrant 1 is up here in the top right hand corner. That includes positive numbers both on the x-axis, which is your horizontal axis, and your y-axis. Quadrant 2, your x's are negative, your y's are positive. Quadrant 3, you have both negative x's and negative y's. And then quadrant 4, you have positive x values and then negative y values. One thing that I use to remember which one's which is it kind of forms the shape of a C. So again, here's your quadrant 1, 2, 3, and then 4. In terms of how to graph, I always tell students you crawl before you walk. So your x represents how much you crawl across the x-axis. Your y represents how much you walk up or down. So notice the point 2, 3, you're crawling over to 2, and then you're going up to 3. Notice negative 1, 3, you're crawling over to negative 1, but you're going up a positive 1. This point here, you're crawling over to negative 1.5, and you're going down to negative 2.5. Then the point 0, 0 is always in the middle. So let's look at some examples of graphing. So we're crawling over to 1, positive 1, and then we're going up 4. So this is the order pair 1, 4. This one is 3, negative 7, so we're crawling over to 3, and then we're going down to 7. This is 3, negative 7. We're going over to negative 2, and then we're going down to negative 8. So this is negative 2, negative 8. And then last but not least, we're crawling over to negative 5, and then we're going up 6. So over to negative 5, and then we're going up 6. So again, the thing you want to make sure you remember is crawl before you walk. So crawl over first on your x value, and then go up or down based upon your y value. Now, when you're graphing more than one point and you're graphing a line, we need to talk about the slope of a line. So the slope of a line is the steepness. Slope can be represented by rise over run. So how much does that line go up or down divided by how much that it goes across? You can have a positive slope. So again, kind of think about like a mountain here. If you're skiing on the mountain, this is a positive one. If you're going downhill, this is going to be a negative slope. You can also just not go anywhere at all. So this is a flat mountain, it's 0. Now this one's a little tricky for students. One way I like to remember it is like, okay, if I'm skiing on a mountain that looks straight up and down like this, I'm just not going to make it. There's no way. So this is considered an undefined slope. Now to calculate slope, we can use the formula y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. That's just a really fancy way of saying take your second y value, which in this case would be 7, subtract your first y value, which would be 5, and then take your second x value, which would be 4, and subtract your first x value, which would be negative 2. So again, it's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. 7 minus 5 would give us 2. 4 minus negative 2 would give us 6. You always want to simplify your slope. So in this case, our simplified slope would be 1 over 3. Think about what that means. That means this line rises 1 and it goes over 3, or it runs 3. So let's do this one. Sometimes I always like to draw my fraction bar and go ahead and put my subtraction symbol because it just helps me in terms of the signs when I'm subtracting. So this is going to be my second y minus my first y. It's going to be my second x minus my first x. 1 minus negative 4 gives us 5. Negative 2 minus negative 3 gives us a positive 1. Now 5 over 1 just simplifies down into 5. This next one, we're going to do 10 minus 8. And then we're going to do 10 minus 4. So this is going to give us 2, and this is going to give us 6. Again, it's going to reduce down into 1/3. And the last one, we're going to do 9 minus 3, and then 2 minus 2. 9 minus 3 is going to give you 6. 2 minus 2 is going to give you 0. Now, when you put in 6 divided by 0 in your calculator, you get an error because you cannot divide by 0. So if this happens, this is a case of that undefined slope. Now, if it had been flip-flopped, so let's say, for example, it had been 0 over 6, that's fine. You would have just had a 0 slope in this case. But just note that 0 in your denominator is no good because you cannot divide by 0. So again, I mentioned different types of slopes. So now we're going to be looking at graphs and trying to figure out what the slope is going to be. So this is going to be, again, a positive slope. This is an example of negative slope. This is 0 slope, a horizontal line, and then a vertical line is going to be considered an undefined slope. Now, finding slope from a graph, you could do it one or two ways, and I'm going to show you both ways. One way is looking at the 2 points you're given, or some cases you're not given the 2 points, you have to find them. But think about what slope means. It's rise over run. So to go from here to here, we're rising 1 and we're going over 2. So our slope is going to be 1 over 2. Now another option would be to write down the ordered pairs that we're given. So this is over 2 up 1. And then we can use our slope formula. Notice it's going to give me the exact same thing. Now this time, if it's a horizontal line, your slope is automatically going to be 0. There's really no calculations you need to do. Now, if you did do one, you're still going to get 0. This one, think about, you're going down this time. So we're going down 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're going over 2. But it's going to be negative since it's a negative slope. Again, if you have to go down to get from one to the other, then we know it's going to be negative. Negative 4 over 2 is going to give us a slope of negative 2. Another way of doing it would have been to write down these ordered pairs, which would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, up 3. So that would be negative 4, 3. My other ordered pair is negative 2, negative 1. Hopefully we get the same answer by doing the formula. So negative 1 minus 3, negative 2 minus negative 4. So this is going to give us negative 4 over 2, which lo and behold is negative 2. So you get the same thing regardless of how you do it here. Now this line, if it's a vertical line, automatically you're going to put your slope is going to be undefined. Now in terms of writing and graphing equations, there's different forms of a line that you're going to need to know. The most important form of a line is slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. So when you have a line on the coordinate plane, the formula y equals mx plus b, m always represents your slope of that line. B always represents the y-intercept, and that's just a fancy way of saying where does it touch the y-axis. Keep in mind that is your vertical axis on the coordinate plane. Point slope and standard form are not quite as important. We're going to talk about standard form in a minute. Intercept form is not quite as important either, but these two are definitely important for you to know. So I would say if anything you're going to memorize these three right here. A vertical line, the one that has the undefined slope, is always going to be in the form of x equals some number. So for example, x equals 7. If I was going to graph that, it'd be a vertical line going through x equals 7. Y equals some number, so let's say for example y equals 5. Instead of a vertical line, it's going to be a horizontal line going through the point y equals 5. So what do you need to write a linear equation? You need two things. You need at least 1 point and you need the slope. Once you have 1 point and the slope, then you can write the equation of a line. My suggestion is to always start with slope-intercept form, and then if you need to, you can work your way to standard form, which I'll show you an example of that in just a minute. So, for example, write each in slope-intercept form. So, let's do a reminder. Slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. Y and x stay the same, but the things that you need is you need the slope and you need the y-intercept. So, you need where it crosses the y-axis. Notice those two things are given to us right here, so we just need to plug in what we have. So, y equals negative 2x. In this case, plus b would be minus 4. So again, here's my slope in front of x, and here's my y-intercept. Same thing, y equals negative 7/5 x. My y-intercept is 2, so this would be plus 2. Now here's an example where you're just given a point and the slope, so what you're missing and what you need to find out in this case is going to be your y-intercept. So what is my y-intercept so I can write this equation? Again, start with y equals mx plus b. Let's plug in what you have. Well, you have a y value, which is 2. You have a slope, which is 7. You have an x value, which is 1. What you're missing is b. So what we're trying to figure out is what is my y-intercept. So now I have 2 equals 7 plus b. Now we're just solving an equation here. So we're going to minus 7, and we get b is equal to negative 5. So now that I've got b, and now that I've got slope, now I can go back and write my equation. Y equals 7x plus b, or in this case, minus 5. So let's do another one like this. Y equals mx plus b. I've got a y which is negative 1. I have a slope which is negative 1. I have an x value which is 3, and I'm trying to figure out b, or my y-intercept. So negative 1 equals negative 3 plus b. I'm going to add 3 to both sides to solve this. So this is going to be 2 is equal to b. Now I've got my two pieces that I need to write my equation. Y equals negative 1x, or just negative x, and then plus b. Let's do just a couple more. This one has a fraction involved. So y equals mx plus b. Plug in what you got. I always start with this on my paper. So we've got y equals my slope, which is 5/3 times 3 plus b. So 5/3 times 3 is going to give us 5. So when we subtract 5 on both sides, we get b is equal to 0. So now I've got my slope here. So y equals 5/3 x. I don't have to write plus 0. If you did, technically it's not wrong, but we really don't need it. So this would be my equation. Now this one says your slope is undefined. So this is where you really got to know the shapes of your graphs here. So remember, an undefined slope, what that is, it's a vertical line. So let's graph our point here. Let's say 2, 5 is going to be right here. A vertical line through that point is going to look something like this. So remember, an undefined slope is going to have a value of just x equals some number. So what does x equal in this case? X is equal to 2. So that's my equation of a line. So remember, x equals some number is going to be that vertical line, and that's what's going to have that undefined slope. Now this one says a slope of 0. So a slope of 0 instead of a vertical line is going to be a horizontal line. So let's just suppose 1, 7 is here. In this case, this line is going to go this way. So this is going to be y equals some number. Well, in this case, what does y equal? Well, y is equal to 7. So again, y equals some number, your slope is going to be 0. X equals some number, your slope is going to be undefined. The way that I remember it, I always think about x's are bad. So if you get an x on your paper, that's considered a bad thing. So this is the one that has the undefined slope.